All right, guys, chapter 13, Missing Memories. Goldie turned up to the well witch and squinted her eyes. Mummy? Am I? Said the witch. I suppose I could be. I always wished for a daughter, although Albert wanted a son. Where is he? He should have been home by now. Have you seen my Albert? No, and you're not her mummy. Come on, Goldie. I tried to grab her hand again, but she wrenched herself free. Don't touch me, Goldie shrieked. My mummy told me you're an evil witch and you do bad things. How much time has been erased? Goldie looked exactly the same. She couldn't have swallowed more than a splash of wine, which I hope meant only a tiny bit of her memory had been taken. Unfortunately, it was the bit that included our friendship. Still, I didn't understand why she was being so mean. She hadn't been this way when we'd first met. Had the wine changed her nature when it took away her memories? Did she really believe I was an evil witch? She's a witch too, I said, pointing to the well witch. She just gave you wine that made you forget we're friends. Ha, said Goldie. I'd never be friends with someone like you. Oh, yes, the wine, said the witch. She dipped the other crystal goblet in the wine and held it out to us. Here, have some. It's very refreshing. Oh, thank you. Goldie reached for the wine again, but I yanked her back by her hair. No, thank you, I said. Ouch, you mean girl, let me go. Mummy! She reached for the witch, who was drinking the wine again and growing younger still. Too young to be anyone's mummy. She's not your mummy, I said. Come on. I dragged Goldie away from the well and into the graveyard while she pulled and thrashed and scratched. Let go of me. Just who do you think you are? Finally, Goldie wriggled free and ran off through the gravestones. She couldn't remember my quest to save Granny, and she clearly wanted nothing to do with me. But she had no way of knowing where we were or how to get home. Even now, I could see she was confused. Wandering aimlessly with no path to guide her, she wouldn't last a day. Goldie, wait! I ran to catch up with her. Go away, she grumbled. But I want to help you. I don't need help. Do you even know where you are? She glanced sideways at the gravestones and the whispering trees. In the woods, of course, and this is a graveyard, so I can't be far from the village. Goldie continued walking, looking every which way, trying to decide which direction to go. I think she knew something strange had just happened, even if she didn't know what it was. Granny said that memory charms are some of the trickiest magic, but you can't really erase someone's mind. You can only muddle it, like throwing dirt in clear water and swishing it around. I wondered if there was any way to make Goldie's memories clear again. Dirt settles eventually, right? I followed a few steps behind Goldie. Every now and then she looked back at me suspiciously, so I focused on the gravestones, reading the names again as we walked. Leonard, Charlotte, Heinrich. Goldie walked a little faster. Wilhelm, Otto. I stopped, squinting at a particularly old gravestone. The stone was crumbling, but the name was clear. Albert. Oh, poor Albert. He wasn't going to make it home for supper after all, and the well witch would never see her love. She'd wait and make herself young again and again, forgetting everything except Albert, and Albert would never come home. I moved on, past the graveyard and the whispering trees, away from the wine well and the well witch, away from the magic to save Granny. I wondered if there could be magic out there that would help Granny with me without taking too much away. Goldie walked maybe 100 feet ahead of me, ambling in an aimless, haphazard way. She glanced back at me over her shoulder and sleep! I sank knee-deep in the bog. I laughed, remembering our mud fight, but then Goldie started crying, and I took her arm and tried to help her out. Don't touch me, she screamed. Stop following me. Stop it, or I'll hit you. She raised her hand into a little fist that probably couldn't punch down dough. Still, she looked fierce. She breathed through clenched teeth, and her very teary eyes were blazing for a fight. It was a strange reversal, me chasing after Goldie, and Goldie making threats and fists. But I wasn't about to let her go off on her own. I was red, I reminded myself, and if nothing else, red was a stubborn color. I hadn't dragged Goldie all this way and gone through all this trouble just to have her ditch me. I stomped both of my feet in the bog. Mud splattered on Goldie's cheek. You don't scare me, I said. I'll come and go as I please. She wiped her face. Oh, you horrible girl. Didn't your mother teach you any manners at all? No, I said, but my granny taught me all sorts of spells and potions and curses. I'm very good at the curses. Goldie scrambled out of the bog to dry ground. Witch! Keep away from me! You're evil! She spoke every word like she was cracking a whip, and it stung. Goldie had never been mean to me like this. Maybe that wine did something else besides take away her memories. Fine. I lifted my hands in surrender. I'll keep my distance, but I can't help it if we're traveling in the same direction. Fine, said Goldie, and she stood and huffed along the riverbank. Keep your eyes open for bears and wolves, I called. I've seen quite a few around here. She slowed her step and allowed me to walk just slightly closer. Now that I was chasing after her and she was trying to get me to leave, I couldn't help but feel a pinch of guilt for how I had acted before. I was getting a dose of my own medicine now. As we traveled, the reality of my situation sank in. The wine would not help Granny, or at least it didn't seem worth the consequences. What if she ended up forgetting me, or worse, hating me as Goldie did now? I didn't know what to do. There were still 2 other options the dwarf had mentioned, the red roses and the magic hearts. But I didn't know where they were or how they worked. I had a feeling the dwarf had purposely kept those details vague to get me to choose the well. He probably hoped I'd drink the wine and forget about the dwarves and how to make them tell me things. Little trickster. The sun dipped behind the mountain peaks and the air grew chill. Bats burst from a cave high up on the mountainside, screeching for their supper. I'm stopping to make camp, I called to Goldie. You may continue without me if you wish. I won't follow you. Goldie stopped and glanced back at me with suspicion. I went to work gathering wood and sticks to build a fire, then found a large pine with branches that arched to the ground to make a small shelter. Goldie moved to a tree a ways from me, but close enough that we could see each other. Once I had my fire going, I gathered some wild raspberries and edible roots. Goldie tried to do the same, but had no success. I sat by the fire and ate a solitary meal. Usually I enjoyed the quiet of the woods, but a quiet Goldie was disconcerting. It was like a songbird gone silent. Goldie peeked out from her pine shelter, but when she saw me watching, she scrambled away. If you're cold, you can come closer to the fire, I said. She didn't move for several minutes, but eventually she scooted closer, stopping a good 5 feet away. She wrapped her shawl tightly around her and shivered, then eyed my meal hungrily. I won't bite, you know, I said. And you can have some berries. I promise they're not poisonous. Hunger won out. She crawled towards me like a wary squirrel, snatched a handful of berries and scrambled back. She devoured the berries in less than a minute. I finished my own meal and pretended not to notice Goldie inching toward the fire until she was only a couple feet away. A few nymphs swirled around her head. She slapped at them with both hands. What are these things? They're making strange sounds. They're tree nymphs, I said. I think they're trying to help you remember the things you forgot. Listen. More nymphs swirled around Goldie, whispering and clicking. She continued to slap them away, then dropped her hands in defeat when it was clear they weren't going anywhere. What's the last thing you remember? I asked. You yanked me by my hair away from that well. No, before that. Yesterday. What happened yesterday? Yesterday? Goldie twisting her fingers in her mud-caked curls. I was arguing with Mummy. What were you arguing about? She was very angry at me because I picked Gerard's peaches and ate them without asking. They were so plump and golden, and I didn't think Gerard would mind. But he was furious, and Mummy called me a little thief and said I had disappointed her. Goldie plopped down in the mud, tears spilled down her cheeks. I breathed a sigh of relief. She hadn't lost too much memory, just a week at most. She must have gotten only a splash of the wine on her tongue. I'm sure she forgives you, I said. I'll bet she's looking for you now. I bet she's worried sick. No, said Goldie, I don't think so. She continued to cry until she passed out from exhaustion. The nymphs swirled around her head, rustling and clicking. Perhaps they'd help restore her memories while she slept. I covered her with leaves to keep her warm, then nestled into my own bed. But I couldn't sleep. The night was so awake. The moon was full and bright. It was like a crystal ball floating in the inky blue sky, magical and mysterious. The mountain peaks formed the silhouette of a giant palace, the trees their faithful sentinels, and the nighttime creatures the court musicians. An owl hooted, raccoons chatted, frogs croaked, and insects sang in a pulsing rhythm. It was a night Granny would have called enchanted, one so full of magic it could not be contained. A wolf howled. Come, he said. I knew it wasn't just any wolf. It was the wolf. He howled again, closer this time. Come, I could feel his words spark and rush inside me, tugging for me to answer. The wolf came silently through the trees. I saw his glowing eyes first, and then the solid black outline of him, a shadow in the moonlight. I stood up. Some wild impulse drove me to step toward him. Was I a fool? The villagers always complained about wolves. They called them wild, vicious beasts, and when livestock went missing, a wolf was always to blame. But they never looked at the good side of wolves, how strong they were and how fiercely loyal to their pack. Wolves would never betray one of their own, but could I be one of its own? The words of the animal charm formed on my lips. Squeak or growl, fur or feather, beast and human come together. Invisible threads tugged at me, drawing me to the wolf, beckoning me to come closer. I took a step toward him. The wolf stepped toward me. I got down on my hands and knees so our faces were level. The wolf lowered his head and stuck out a paw. I reached out a trembling hand. Tree or sky, lake or land, flesh to fur, paw to hand. Ever so gently, I brushed the tip of the wolf's paw, and the spark that connected us suddenly burst into flames. Fire surged through my veins, from my toes to my fingertips. Images flashed in my mind of wolves running wild through the woods. I felt their energy, their strength. It rushed through my head like a powerful river current, sweeping me away so that I nearly lost myself. Come, said the wolf. Don't be afraid. All right, we'll see what happens tomorrow.